Welcome to Monarchy Marathon. In this video, I'll be talking about the many different TV and movie options we have for Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary of Scotland came out in 1936, was 2 hours and 3 minutes long, not rated, but I think all ages is probably fine. Mary, Queen of Scots came out in 1971, was 2 hours and 12 minutes, rated PG-13. Gunpowder, Treason, and Plot came out in 2004, was 2 episodes, altogether about 3 hours and 18 minutes. Was rated 16 plus. Reign came out in 2013, was 78 episodes, each episode about 40 minutes each. Rated TV 14 plus. Mary, Queen of Scots came out in 2013, was 2 hours long, unrated. Queens, The Virgin and the Martyr came out in 2017, was 9 50-minute episodes, rated 13 plus. Mary, Queen of Scots was a movie that came out in 2018, was 2 hours and 3 minutes, rated R. Mary of Scotland starts in 1561 with Mary arriving back in Scotland after being in France for most of her life, and ends with Mary's death. Script. This is an interesting take on Mary. She is a lot like Elizabeth at the beginning, claiming she will not marry. Then the rest of the movie is about her trying to be a fair and just queen, not understanding why everyone else doesn't see her common sense. In some ways, this Mary is more politically savvy than some of the others. There is a lot of focus on the romance between her and Bothwell. You always know Bothwell's coming when you see the bagpipes or hear the bagpipes. So many bagpipes. Elizabeth is a smaller side character, more reactionary than anything else. Acting. Katharine Hepburn is always a joy to watch. She is the reason I bought this movie, even though I usually don't watch much that was made before the 1960s. She was definitely the star of the show. I also thought Bothwell was well done. The rest of the cast was forgettable for me. Production design and costuming. I don't watch a lot of black and white films. I wasn't expecting a lot and was surprised by how grand the setting was. The costumes didn't catch my attention much, but I was definitely enjoying the very wide shots of the castle. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. Violence in old movies is kind of like watching toddlers go at each other with foam swords. Something floppy hits them, they cringe a bit, and sometimes fall down dramatically. It was kind of like that. Mary, Queen of Scots. This film begins in 1558 when Mary is still married to King Francis of France and ends with her death. Script. The opening sequence includes the line, "This is the story of the fierce struggle between ... the rival queens." Okay, yeah, they really try to exaggerate and highlight the differences between the two queens in this movie. Mary is all heart, contrasting the 1936 version. She basically just does whatever Catholic advisors tell her to do, except for when it goes against what her heart wants. She lets herself be tricked into things by her emotions. She does not come across as someone who has the skills to be a queen. On the other hand, Elizabeth is all brains and cunningly manipulates almost all the events of the movie. Acting. Vanessa Redgrave as Mary was a very sweet and pious Mary, but she didn't really stand out to me. I felt like I received a gift when I found out Glenda Jackson is Elizabeth again in this. She stole the movie for me. I also thought Timothy Dalton's performance as Lord Darnley was fantastic. Production design and costuming. Loved the production design for this movie. They filmed at a lot of amazing locations and dressed them up to perfection. The costumes were nice too, but I found myself looking at the backgrounds more than the costumes. I have to say though, oh my god, I hate this soundtrack. It is so repetitive. Every time the main theme played, it just made me annoyed and took me out of the moment. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. There is no blatant sex or nudity, just one passionate makeout scene. A little bit of violence, but it's so fake looking that I couldn't help but laugh instead of my usual grimace and trying not to look away. Gunpowder, Treason, and Plot. This miniseries is composed of basically 2 separate movies. One about Mary, the other about her son James. For this, I'll only be focusing on the first half about Mary. I'll come back and do the second half when I do my comparison video on James I. Like the others, it pretty much starts in 1561 with Mary returning to Scotland from France and ends with her death. Script. This is the most ill-prepared to be Queen of Scotland version of Mary that I've seen. But the subtitle to the title says, Mary, Queen of Scots, Reign of Terror. So maybe that was on purpose. She is very naive, seemingly hoping that everything will just fall into place the way she wants because she's there and she is who she is. I mean, at least in the other options, it's kind of understandable why Mary married Darnley and fell in love with Bothwell. In this, she's just not paying attention. I know they were trying to tell a complicated story in a short amount of time, but it rushed by way too fast, and I couldn't bring myself to care too much about Mary or the people around her. In fact, I ended up rooting for the people opposing her, except for Elizabeth. For some reason, they made her into a stereotypical evil, bloodthirsty queen. Why haven't you killed her yet? Destroy her! Acting. Although I wasn't overall a fan of the story, the acting was well done all around. The actor who stood out the most to me was Stephen Duffy as Lord James. This was the first version of him that made me realize what a difficult position he was in. Production design and costuming. This was middle of the road for me. It certainly wasn't terrible, but I didn't have any wow moments either. If your number one priority is aesthetics, this is not the best choice for you. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. There is waist up and shadow sex, warning for many forced sexual encounters. A few quick battles, but they don't last long. Reign. This series starts in 1557 with a very young Mary leaving the convent she was raised in to go to France in order to meet her intended, the future King of France. It ends with Mary's death. Script. This series is very much a crazy soap opera with very little input from history. Different from the other options, this spends 3 of its 4 seasons with Mary in France. Although it's primarily a romance between Mary and her first husband, Francis, we also follow a ton of other characters like the conniving Catherine Medici, the drama and scandal that surrounds Mary's ladies, the completely fictional half-brother of Francis who knows things about the weird people out in the woods, the mystery girl who never shows her face that lives in the old castle tunnels. You get where I'm going with this. It's one of those series where each episode ends on a cliffhanger with a dun 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 moment. Acting. This has a huge cast. I had a couple favorites, but to be honest, I think I mostly liked them because I recognized them from other things that I enjoyed. Mary was played by Adelaide Kane, who I thought did a good job with what she was given. Production design and costuming. Oh, once again, we have a show that very heavily suffers from prom dress syndrome. More than half of these costumes are outfits that would not be out of place on people walking around in my city's downtown area. Even the jewelry looked like it came from Claire's accessories. Pretty sure the costuming department threw accuracy out the window and just decided to have fun with it however they wanted. That's fine. The castle locations they shot in were very pretty. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. The whole plot revolves around sexiness, but it never gets very graphic. Most of the violence uses fancy camera work to make sure you don't actually see anything too gruesome, and then people are magically covered in blood. Mary, Queen of Scots is a 2013 Swiss period movie. This starts with the birth of Mary and ends with her captivity in England. Script. The language is a mix of French and English. I don't know French, and there were whole sections in French with no subtitles, so my ability to have a valid opinion on the script is debatable. I appreciated that, unlike the others, it encompasses all of Mary's life. But it's a 2-hour movie, so they had to rush through a lot. I think this might have been my favorite option if it were a longer series and had subtitles. But as it is, I had a hard time getting into it. It was also different in that it was not in any way about Elizabeth. In fact, she's not in the movie at all, unless you count this weird doll. Acting. I like this Mary. She's not overly conceited, overly arrogant, or overly stupid. Instead, she's a regular woman doing her best to do what she was taught to do as queen. But everything keeps going wrong and is mostly outside of her control. Overall, good acting by the entire cast. Mary Queen of Scots was played by Camille Ruthford, Bothwell by Sean Biggerstaff, and Darnley by Aneurin Bardyard. I hope I said that right. Production design and costuming. The costumes are not overly pretty, but possibly more authentic. The sets and many shots of the landscapes and castles are gorgeous, but the severe shaky cam was awful. Also, have to say, weird music choice. It's super silent and then hits you with a foreboding horror movie music. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. Nothing graphic on either, some blood here and there, and brief shadow sex. Queens, the Virgin and the Martyr is a Spanish and British television series. This show begins again when Mary first returns to Scotland and ends with her death. Script. This show is equally about Mary and Elizabeth, and we actually get quite a bit of Philip II of Spain as well. This script is the Mary versus Elizabeth catfight show. These two queens really don't like each other from the get-go. They also meet a lot, more than in any other version. This Elizabeth likes to threaten anyone and everyone. Also, she really likes sex, as in she basically has a lineup of male companions. This Mary is the most mean and stomp-your-foot spoiled princess. She also really likes sex. This makes for a very different version of the two queens than we're used to. Acting. Sorry to say, in my opinion, this is the worst acting of all the options. Maybe it's due to the script, but so much of it felt stilted and awkward. No one really stood out to me, and I have to say I was pretty bored most of the series. Weird choice to have James VI of Scotland not have a Scottish accent. Production design and costuming. The costumes are inconsistent and interesting. Some of them are appropriately period-looking. Some fall into the prom dress category. Others are the Tudors, the Spanish princess, levels of fantasy. No major complaints, other than, according to this show, there is no such thing as aging. Same with the sets and scenery. Some are gorgeous, and then others just are kind of blah. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. As mentioned, Elizabeth and Mary both really like sex, so they have a lot of sex with lots of different and sometimes surprising people. But nudity or anything super graphic never happens. One scene of sexual violence and one battle. The only bloody scenes are the executions. Mary, Queen of Scots. This does the thing I hate. It starts with her execution, then goes back in time to when she returns to Scotland. Script. So, I watched this a few years ago and then promptly wiped it from my memory. It was almost painful having to pay to rent it again. Okay, let's get this over with. This version of Mary is very headstrong and self-assured. But she's so busy doing what she wants, regardless of what anyone says, all the while being condescending, that it's no wonder everyone turned against her. At least in the other version, you could blame it on Mary just being naive and not suited for the crown. In this, I just found her unlikable. I am sorry to say, I didn't like this script's interpretation of Elizabeth either. Acting. Even though I didn't like this version of Mary, I still think the actress who played her, Sars Ronan, I'm so sorry. You're cool, but I don't know how to say your name, was very good. I almost didn't recognize David Tennant as John Knox, if not for his commanding voice. Elizabeth was played by Margot Robbie. Production design and costuming. I did not care for the costumes in this movie. They were plain and boring. Also, some of the designs for the hair were weird and stood up really tall. I don't like to be mean, but this was also by far my least favorite of Elizabeth's makeup. She looked like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. The camera work with the castles and the beautiful Scottish landscapes were, in my opinion, the best part of the movie. Sex and nudity, violence and gore. Beware, there is no romance between Mary and Bothwell. Instead, the entire relationship is forced. Pretty much every sexual encounter in the movie is forced. No battles, but there is some bloody murder. Final opinion. Mary of Scotland. If you haven't tried watching a black and white movie before, this isn't a bad place to start. It's actually my second favorite of these options for its script and acting. Mary, Queen of Scots. This is my favorite of the options. No, it's not just because I love Glenda Jackson as Elizabeth. I think this does what the 2018 version tried to do, show us how two very different but strong women in their own way were put in very difficult situations, and history chose the victor. Gunpowder, Treason, and Plot. I would say this one probably has the most action, but I can't recommend it. I have a lot nicer things to say about the second episode in my James I comparison video. Reign. Do you love teenage dramas? Then this is absolutely the choice for you. I would even say this could appeal to people who don't usually like period dramas, since it never actually felt like one. Mary, Queen of Scots. I'm sad to say, even though I really liked the actors in this one, it just goes too fast and it misses a lot of key points in Mary's life. However, this is the option if you want to save time while still getting an idea of her entire life. Just make sure you either know French and English or find a subtitled version. Queens, the Virgin, and the Martyr. Are you really just looking for the option that has the most sexualized version of Mary and Elizabeth? Here you go. Mary, Queen of Scots. I did not like this and will most likely never watch it again. However, I know plenty of people have given it great reviews, so even if it's not my thing, maybe it'll be yours. I hope this helped you out, or at least amused you. Happy watching.